Good evening, good evening, good evening, brothers and sisters. Welcome to another episode of Reconstructing Minds Incorporated in partnership with Positive Lifestyle Management and Project Righteous Endeavor. My name is Brother Shantario, aka Brother Midnight. I want to turn your attention to something very important. Last night, me and Brother Fee Taylor of Positive Lifestyle Management, we broke down the order from Judge Lennon Weber in the according to Mr. Larry Hoover's motion, and one particular thing really stuck out to me. On page 13 in this order is talking about the American social contract. And in reference to that, I looked at a definition for social contract, and it said this. It says, essential for any organized behavior in a group or community that is unwritten but agreed upon and establishes responsibilities and rights. Now, in the teachings of the blueprint, in on page 21, it talks about containment, the unwritten law. So, according to this definition of social contract, there has to be something in reference to this particular teaching in the blueprint, which in the order, a statement was made about Mr. Larry Hoover wanting to reprint the blueprint at a particular time, and they thought that it was gang related, according to two writers slash editors of the Chicago Sun-Times. So in reference to what I'm going to be talking about today, we're going to dig into a dynamic that most of us have not seen. Social contract, the unwritten law. Social contract, the unwritten law. Okay? Now, on page 21 in the blueprint, it says division part 2. Containment, the unwritten law, that is unwritten. What is unwritten law? When the bondage, like circumstances of socio-economically induced poverty, overwhelm an undeveloped and inexperienced young mind, bizarre behavior, crime, and may be the only way he knows to respond. I want to look at that word socio-economic, which is the root word for social economically. And what that is, brothers and sisters, it says related to or the command with the interaction of social and economic factors. Okay? It says, back to the teachings of the blueprint on page 21, it says many poor people sympathize with this particular frame of reference, a shared and share a common belief that their poverty is somehow perpetuated by the system. I want you to pay close attention to this because it's going to get interesting as we go forward. It says this allows a large portion of our youth to not feel embarrassed or remorseful in the commission of a crime. Combined with the fact that poverty is the socio-economically designed or unwritten laws that contain poor people in reserved areas of land called ghettos. For instance, the written law states that you have the right to live and visit someone in any area of public domain. However, the unwritten law of containment states, move into this area, step across this boundary line, or get caught around here after dark, and you're dead. And that is the exact mind frame of the youth in our ghettos today in 2021. We see the dynamics of what the ghetto children, specifically Black and Hispanic, are going through. It says the written laws are buried so deep in judicial jargon that a person needs a lawyer just to argue a simple complaint or to prove a minute innocence. In other words, that the words judicial jargon, in other words, brothers and sisters, that means it's wrapped up in the legislation of the United States of America, which established our laws today. It says the level of complication helps many to not understand written law and therefore not believe in it. If police did not tour our neighborhoods and enforce written laws, hardly anyone would obey them, least of all the impoverished youth of today. And it's getting to a level in these times and ages that we're living in that the youth have no respect for the law. And there are so many different things that play a role in that, because if you can remember, going all the way back to 2015, but this has been going on ever since Blacks have been and Hispanics have been in the United States of America, is that we are constantly targeted just for the color of our skin. We are targeted. We are looked at as an enemy of society based on this impoverished system that our very own government has established through creating poverty. It says, on the other hand, the written laws of containment are upheld and enforced by the citizenry, and which it really is. Because social contract is based on the people. The people give the government their power by voting the politicians into position. It says, this is why you can ask the average impoverished youth which streets are his neighborhood's boundary lines, and 99 times out of the 100, he will know. Why? Because he's used to it. Growing up in poverty, growing up in the hood, what all you see in the hood is drugs, prostitution. In other words, the so-called American dream. Although it is not inscribed in law books, and impoverished youth instinctively know that they are subject to harassment, bodily harm, and possibly death if they do go beyond their boundary line. That is the unwritten law of containment. And it's true. Anytime you have a Black young male, female outside of their boundaries and they are somewhere else, just you can trace it back. Look at what Trayvon Martin had to go through. This man followed him. Zimmerman. He followed this young man all the way up into where he was going, got into a physical altercation with him, and then shot him because he thought Trayvon Martin was doing something wrong. It says, another law of containment is the policy of viewing most Blacks as potential criminals or hardened and accomplished criminals. In other words, in this particular sentence, it's talking about those of us who are stereotyped by society and our very own government, which in reference is the system. It says the unwritten law makes it extremely difficult for poor youth to venture out of their own community, Blacks and Hispanics in particular. History has taught them that as soon as they cross the boundary line, they become suspect to whatever. Therefore, those youth who have chosen crime as their ticket to fulfilling the American dream soon realize that the most safest and risk-free areas to commit crime is their own neighborhoods. And that's true. That is very true. And I wanted to tie in something from an article called A Review of Consequences of Poverty on Economic Decision-Making, an hypothesized model of cognitive mechanism. This will show us the thinking patterns of the young Black and Hispanic youth of America. It says this review focuses on the issue of poverty affecting economic decision-making by critically evaluating existing studies. The author proposed a structural model detailing the cognitive, or the way we think, mechanism involved in how poverty negatively impacts economic decision-making, and explores evidence supporting the basis for the formation of this model. The suggested mechanisms consist of a relationship between poverty and 4 other factors: cognitive load, experiencing negative affect and stress; 2, executive functions, attention, working memory, and self-control; 3, intuition / deliberation in decision-making; and economic decision-making, time discounting, and risk preference, with a final addition of financial literacy as a covariate, this paper focuses on shortfalls in published research and delves further into this proposed model. Reading on, and it says poverty is a global sociocultural phenomenon usually examined from an economic perspective. In behavioral studies, research on poverty largely focuses on the familia or the family and social aspects of background of people experiencing poverty, like our young Black males and youth and the Hispanics, excuse me, with the majority of research being carried out on children, our youth. Behavioral focuses of poverty research have included the psychological determinants of poverty, as well as the consequences of poverty on the mental health and cognitive functions of individuals. In this study pointed out the extended need to direct attention towards the correct neglected issue of poverty perpetuation, which has generally been overlooked in favor of assessing the poverty from a solely economical or macroeconomical perspective. Thus, it is clearly of importance to further examine the factors that may potentially help to unveil underlying reasons for poverty perpetuation. And what I've read so far ties in directly into the teachings of the blueprint. Notice what it says on verse 21. It says, many poor people sympathize with this particular frame of reference and share a common belief that poverty is somehow perpetuated by the system. Okay? It says, these factors include specific aspects of an individual's perception of issues, personal experiences, behaviors, and individual abilities, which can either contribute to or attenuate poverty. According to poverty perpetuation is likely the outcome of interplay of various forms of non-productive behaviors, such as inappropriate economic decision-making, lack of own health care. These factors, in particular, those related to economic decisions, are often labeled as causes of poverty. And we just read it on page 22. Page 22. In the second paragraph, it says, therefore, those youth who have chosen crime as their ticket to fulfilling the American dream soon realize that the most safest and risk-free areas to common crime is in their own neighborhoods. And why is that? Because they are taught to not go out their boundary lines, to not go outside of the ghettos, because when they do, it says in that same paragraph, another written law of containment is the policy of viewing most Blacks as potential criminals and hardened and accomplished criminals. In other words, this unwritten law makes it extremely difficult for poor youths to venture outside their own communities. They don't want to go outside their own communities. Because of this unwritten law of containment, which is rooted in poverty, which is set up by the system to create chaos and confusion within the neighborhoods of Blacks and Hispanics. Let's continue to read. It says this, in the Black community, it is this frame of reference that has produced the present rash of Black on Black crime. However, the irony of this matter is, if poor people realize that their poverty is socioeconomically induced, then they must also realize that conservative reporters, the word conservatives means they do not want change. They want things to remain as they are. That's what conservative means, especially when it comes to the ghettos of Black and brown children. It says that conservative supporters of socioeconomically induced poverty foresaw the rise of crime as a reactionary condition of today's economic crisis. In other words, they seen it before it happened. They knew exactly what was going to happen. And they set it up like that for it to happen. And we see the result of it today. We see the result. Prisons are constantly being built. They're constantly being built and invested in by some of everyone. One in particular person that I love to watch play basketball, studied his moves for the majority of my youth, is an investor in prisons. Michael Jordan. He invests in prisons. He has invested in prisons, building prisons. And the Black community does what? Buy his shoes. And he'll tell you, his shoes was not made for those in poverty. His shoes were made for the middle class, the upper class, those who could afford them. But it is us who live in poverty, even below poverty, that go out and buy a $300 pair of shoes. And it's not even the shoe that you're paying for the name of a person who endorses building more prisons. Let's continue to read. The proof is in the manner in which they are preparing for the reactions of our youth. Simply, they are changing the laws and building more prisons. The most obvious and recommended remedy to this dilemma is to get an education that will allow access to a higher standard of living. So they think education is the sole answer for the poverty line all across the United States, all over the world. For an individual, this remedy is excellent. However, for every individual who escapes poverty through education, there are thousands, perhaps millions, who are snared in poverty's grasp through illiteracy. Illiteracy, not able to read, write, comprehend, do math, no education. But this is what the blueprint says on page 27. It says, thus the vision is that we dedicate ourselves to the war on illiteracy, that we pursue professional business careers such as accounting, drafting, computer sciences, business management, that we master the trades of industry such as brick masonry, building and road constructing, textiles, machine shop, surveying, welding, that we acquire knowledge and expertise in the area that are needed in our communities, such as plumbing, carpentry, building management and maintenance, auto body repairs, auto mechanic, etc., that we prepare ourselves to become small business administrators in areas such as grocery shop, clothing stores, hardware, entertainment, lounges and dance halls, distributors of general household merchandise, etc., that we amass credentials such as certificates, diplomas, and degrees as a statement of our desire to excel positively. Notice what it says now. It says that we desire to excel positively, that we expand our views to include the educational, economical, political, and social realities of society, that we begin to value the positive implications of righteous endeavors, that we ask, no, how much will I make, but rather we should ask, is this in harmony with the 6 principles of growth and development? Why? Because growth and development builds in stages and degrees. It says, and most importantly, we must change our conduct and attitude to fit the vision by making our actions reflect the same. That's the answer, brothers and sisters. We wage war on illiteracy. We help those who have a problem with illiteracy. We become teachers instead of naysayers. Instead of being stereotyped. Okay? It says, for an individual, back on page 22, it says, for an individual, this remedy is excellent. However, for every individual who escapes poverty through education, there are thousands, perhaps millions who are snared in poverty's grasp through illiteracy. What is needed is a program that is designed to uplift and encourage our youth toward getting more proper education before they are caught in the vicious cycle of recidivism, which means returning back to criminal lifestyle and criminal behavior. Added to this program, there must be a community network established that reinforces one's educational, economical, political, and social growth and development, which he turns to society. Otherwise, as our youth return home, they will soon lose their direction, as recidivism indicates, and fall victim to the effects of the unwritten laws of containment, which means you don't leave beyond the boundary lines of your neighborhood. You're trapped in the ghetto, and you return to this attitude and behavior which is destructive, and you end up being stereotyped based on black crime. It says, for those who believe in the 6 principles of growth and development. What are the 6 principles? Educational, economical, political, social development, organization, unity. It says there is only one way in which we can overcome this crisis. We must organize our lives towards specific goals and objectives. The vision has made us aware of the need to organize our lives. Similarly, the new concept has given us an order to guide our lives in the proper and positive directions of educational, economical, political, social growth, and development. Since the fundamental problem confronting us is one of accomplishing positive growth and development, the time has come to settle our differences and place everything that we have into the service of our struggle. Struggle meaning movement. Personality conflicts and differences of opinion will exist, but they must be pushed aside. Our main concerns from this point on must be based upon positive growth and development. That's what it's all about. Seek higher levels of education. Become good economists over the means you make. And once you establish a good rapport on being a good economist over the means you make, you create avenues to generate wealth. Not only just wealth, but generational wealth for your families to come. Politically, you stay out of the way of this political aspect of social contract, which is based on unwritten law. The system itself is the determining factor of how a lot of the Black and brown kids of the ghettos and the communities of America, they play a major role in this. Why? Because they create the conflict, and once the conflict has birthed itself, recidivism has set in, and then what? They build more prisons. They hold you confined to the prison system. We have to educate our youth on how to reconstruct their minds through cognitive reconstructing. There are cognitive functions that exist within the youth's mind where they go off their visual, they go off what they see and think that's life. They think the American dream is life. And in order for them to attain the American dream, they have to go out, sell drugs, pimp women, and do all those things that are not conducive to their own personal growth and development. That's what it's all about, brothers and sisters. Helping the youth understand educational, economical, political, social development in their lives to truly achieve growth and development, to master the 4 initiatives of growth and development. Initiative is a self-reliant enterprise. It takes initiative to achieve any intentional outcome. We must continue to educate our youth on the trap and the snare of the system. it says, we are aware that certain elements of society have unwritten laws of containment that they enforce, defend, and live by, and that these laws are race and class discriminatory in their application. In other words, they discriminate against the Black and brown children of America. However, this should serve only to motivate us beyond falling into the traps of death and incarceration, which are ingredients for recidivism. Just as government leaders foresaw the rise of crime as a reactionary condition of socio-economically induced poverty and provided for it by expanding America's penal system, the vision foresees the eventual class extermination of a large portion of our youth through death, incarceration, and recidivism, and have prepared a way for us to avoid these traps by adhering to the teachings of the new concept and live according. For we have to continue to accept, or we can continue to accept death, incarceration, and recidivism. On page 27 in closing, it says the 6 principles of growth and development contain the translation of the new concept and the keys to our survival. If one is to understand the philosophy of the new concept, then these laws and principles must be accepted, understood, and lived by. What is the philosophy? In other words, we must understand what governs our thoughts, conducts, and the principles of the universe. In other words, our growth and development, the general principles of a field of knowledge, a particular system of ethics, calmness, and composure. It is the 6 principles of growth and development that we must line up with as a translation of the new concept, and we live the vision. In order to live the vision, we must do the work, brothers and sisters. And with that, we're going to close out. I hope we can understand what's really going on. The reason that the system think Mr. Larry Hoover is a threat is because his teaching of being educated, understanding how to be financially literate through understanding economics, understanding the realm of politics, what goes on within the political realms of our local, state, and federal government, social development, understanding the relationship between us and the communities and the people we serve. It is with great pleasure that I take a stand in the campaign hashtag Free Larry Hoover Now. Because at the end of the day, if we don't stand for something, we'll fall for anything. And with that, I'll say plenty much love to all my brothers and sisters. And I pray that you would take heed to what's going on around you within our own society. Thank you.